Joining me now to talk about NATO exercises currently taking place in Ukraine is William Courtney. He is a foreign relations analyst who served as special assistant to the U.S. president for Russia and Ukraine. He is also a former ambassador to Georgia and Kazakhstan. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Elaine.
You know, there was a lot going on in Ukraine. We saw a couple of stories, but there's also a big agreement that was signed as well. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, I want to ask you about these NATO exercises taking place in Ukraine. What is your take on that? Obviously, this is sending a message to Russia.
There was an important NATO summit in Wales, September 4th and 5th, which made several decisions, including establishing a very rapid response task force as part of the effort to strengthen the eastern members of NATO. That includes the Baltics, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, those countries, and several others. It has been decided to carry out exercises in western Ukraine to show how Ukraine can cooperate more closely with NATO. But there are 700 miles between those exercises and the fighting in eastern Ukraine. NATO has made clear at the summit that they will not be fighting in Ukraine on behalf of NATO against Russia.
So do you think this puts more pressure on Russia also with this agreement that the EU signed with Ukraine, this trade agreement?
Yes, the combination of strengthening NATO in the eastern members of NATO and then Ukraine's signing an association agreement and ratifying it with the European Union, both steps move Ukraine a little closer to NATO. Probably Vladimir Putin has done more to unite Ukrainians to go westward than anyone since Taras Shevchenko, a famous 19th century Ukrainian poet. The EU trade agreement is important, but President Poroshenko very wisely, prudently, has limited the impact of that for over a year in order to satisfy some Russian trade concerns.
And Ukraine is offering some concessions as well. They're offering some of those areas there in eastern Ukraine, some autonomy. But where does it all go from here? Does this show that Ukraine is eager to move on? It's taking some steps despite this conflict that is still taking place?
Both Russia and Ukraine seem to be, for the moment, wanting to move on. Ukraine recognizes it's not going to be able militarily to defeat Russian forces in eastern Ukraine, so it's granted special status for the two regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, in the eastern part of the country, that give them more local autonomy, but keep them within Ukraine formally. Russia has been surprised at how strong the sanctions have been, the fact that the European Union especially has unveiled a new package and implemented a new package of sanctions. The Russians expected America to do it. They weren't so sure the Europeans would do it.
So does this offer an opportunity for Russia as well?
Yes, it does offer an opportunity for Russia, but it's not clear that Russia is going to take it. Russia has just announced that it's expanding its troop presence in Crimea. That could be a sign that it wants to move up along the Azov Sea to create a land bridge with Russia. There are Russian troops east of Mariupol on the northern side of the Azov Sea. So it's still unclear whether the Kremlin plans more military activity to open a land bridge to Crimea. Crimea is only accessible to Russia now by sea. Most transportation in Russia is rail. They need a rail bridge there for their strategic purposes and economic purposes.
And all of this is happening while we still have this ceasefire that is amazingly in place between Ukraine and Russia.
Yes, the ceasefire has been holding by and large. There have been some small violations so far. That's a sign that both sides at least want a breather. But the key question is, what are the long-term intentions of the Kremlin? Are they going to carry out more military action? Are they going to take a look to see what the impact of these sanctions are? Because these sanctions are hitting the energy sector, the most important export sector in Russia's economy. These sanctions are hitting them really hard.
All right, Ambassador William Courtney, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.